I'm Taya Phillips, and our modern U.S. history class interviewed my grandpa Harold Post so we know even more about the Vietnam War. A few years ago, he was interviewed, and we wanted to go into more depth this year. So please enjoy hearing his stories that start when he was 22 years old.
In 1965, I joined the Air National Guard in Sioux City, and the reason behind that was a friend of mine also belonged there. And secondly, up to that point, they did not admit very many people into the Air National Guard. All of a sudden in 1965, they opened it wide up, and there were a number of people that were admitted. I grew up in a town 70 miles north of here, and did not know in this area that a lot of the people around here are also former Air National Guard members. I chose the Air National Guard probably because it was one of the easier branches of the service. I did not want to be drafted into the Marines, and not the Army too bad. I did not like the water either, so the Navy was out of question. So the Air Force or the Air Guard was a good fit for me. And so what happened then, we had to spend 4 months on active duty, and I spent that in 1965. And then in January 26th of 1968, there was a ship captured by the North Koreans called the U.S. Pueblo. And so consequently, at that point, we were called up as the Air National Guard. You would suspect then that we would have been supporting the concerns that they have as far as North Korea was concerned.
Can you please describe your daily or weekly routine that you had while you were there?
And I was assigned to a military police squadron when I was in Vietnam, and most of the time my job was just to do typing and so forth. However, at times we were expected to carry a gun and go out on patrols. That sort of lived very, very poorly. I mean, they had probably a home that was a fourth the size of this, and there was no air conditioning, dirt floors, not have stoves, very rarely electricity, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of black market stuff. They would send the kids out to sell black market things. There was a lot of prostitution that went on and so forth. I often wondered as we traveled from our base to Quy Nhon why these houses were built about this high off the ground on stilts. That was the monsoon season. And what happened at that point, then it started raining one day and it never quit for 14 days, day and night. And so all of these areas filled up with water, and that was actually their rice paddies. And so they would seed the rice. As far as you've seen the potbelly pigs, my first experience as far as potbelly pigs was in Vietnam. And those pigs ran in and out of the house. Pigs would be butchered, the cattle not. The cattle were considered very sacred at that point. Everything pretty much ran wild. And something else I remember is sometimes they would dip the water out of the field. We would use a pump with electricity. They had two young ladies, one on each side, and each had a string, and they had a cone-shaped instrument that they let in the water, it filled up with water, they tightened it up, and it went over the other side. They did that all day long. I mean, those people worked extremely hard.
Okay. Could you please describe the food when you were in Vietnam?
As far as the food we had, it was very American. I mean, we had, and we could eat as much as we wanted. Ice cream was a real treat. We could get ice cream whenever we wanted as well. So we were treated very well.
What were some of the more difficult things about being involved in a war that spanned nearly 20 years?
It was just the ongoing war, and there was no winning of it. War never satisfies anything, really, when you look at it. I mean, it's such a waste of resources, a waste of people, a waste of money, financial, so forth. So there are times where we just have to stand up for what we believe in, but there's no winners in war.
While in Vietnam, did you consider yourself a hero, or did you feel like you were there doing what you were told to do, and why?
I did not consider myself a hero. We did, and one thing you will learn with the military service is you don't learn to question. You learn to take the orders and do what's expected of you, and act appropriately. So.
I'm guessing there are things you will never forget, both good and bad. Can you please share any of those times with us and why they are unforgettable for you?
Some of the people that came in were killed as they came in, and really destroyed the body. You can't imagine how much destruction occurred, and that was probably one of the things that I remember from Vietnam. A good relationship with the Vietnamese. I could not speak much Vietnamese, but the people were kind and they were considerate and so forth. You never knew whether they were really your friends or at night whether they were actually working for the enemy at that point. Vietnamese people are a good people. I mean, they're very short in stature. I mean, we must look like giants to them because very few of them were at any height whatsoever. But hard-working people, polite.
How long did you serve?
We spent 4 months in Sioux City, then I spent roughly 12 to 13 months in Vietnam. When our guard unit came back, we could be separated at that point. I chose at that point to serve out the 2 years. And the reason I chose that, number one, I was not certain what I wanted to do with my life, and number two is they had a very good program as far as going to college was concerned. All of my undergraduate and part of my graduate degree was paid for by the military.
That was with the GI Bill then?
The GI Bill took care of everything. I did do some work. I tutored math students in the evening, but basically the GI Bill, they give us a set amount of dollars, and of course a dollar went a long ways further then than it does now, but the GI Bill covered all of my undergraduate, and then when I did some graduate work at Mankato, it covered quite a bit of that as well. So
we will be learning about some Americans' harsh treatment toward Vietnam War veterans in class. In your previous interviews, you said you didn't experience much of that around here. I'm glad for that, but I'm wondering why you think that might have been.
We really never talked about Vietnam. We never talked about being over there, that sort of thing. So most of the people were strangers to me, and so no idea that I actually served in the Vietnam War. If you went back home, in some of the areas, there was a lot of disdain for the Vietnam veterans at that point. They were not regarded with high esteem whatsoever. When I moved back into my home area again, there was no respect as far as the veterans were concerned at that point. That has changed tremendously over the years now.
We found it interesting but saddening that veterans weren't respected back then, but we're glad that's changed today. We also liked that he learned discipline and had many doors open to him in life in general due to his service, which led us to wonder,
how has being a war veteran affected your outlook on war in general? If so, how?
There is a necessity to stand up for what you believe and what your country believes in. There will always be wars, and there will always be rumors of wars. I mean, that's just a fact of life. But war is not a good thing. It's not a fun thing. It's not. People don't win, even though sometimes people think they win. There are times where we just have to stand up for what we believe in, but there's no winners in war.
Do you have any words of wisdom for anyone going into the armed forces?
I believe that every person should go through the service. I mean, number one, it just establishes some structure and so forth. Two, it allows you to see some things that you've never seen before. It allows you to experience some opportunities that you've never. I would commend you for going into the service. I think it's something that everyone should experience. I mean, it's just good for growing up.
Our class learned a lot from Mr. Post, and we thank him for both his service during the Vietnam War and for coming in to talk with us. The in-person element is something a textbook can't provide us, so we were glad to have him in our classroom. And if you missed Mr. Post's interview from a few years ago, we encourage you to check out the school's website where you'll find all veteran interviews.